Hey there guys, it's Slinger from Mad Galaxy here, and I'm finally here to review The Amazing Spider-Man for you guys. Now I actually did see The Amazing Spider-Man on the 4th of July, but I came out of it with very mixed feelings, and I was really kind of actually disappointed in this movie. I was subconsciously comparing it to the Sam Raimi movies, which, even though the first one came out 10 years ago, they really don't feel that long ago, you know? Before I go further, I'm going to tell you guys that The Amazing Spider-Man, you know, it's been a reboot that's been announced for, it was announced about maybe 2-3 years ago, and a lot of people, myself included, were very skeptical, actually very upset about this, especially people who were fans of any of the Tobey Maguire films. I'm a fan of the first two. Third one, don't care about. But then as the trailer started to come around, I said, wow, this actually looks pretty good. And then eventually I got really excited for the film. I started reading the comics, and I realized that this film's going to have a much more sarcastic, witty Spidey in like the comics did. It was going to have web shooters and all that stuff, so I actually got really excited for this film. And the first time I saw it, not only do I think I kind of blew my expectations out of proportion, but I also still had the Sam Raimi movies in my head. I had just got done watching the, you know, Doc Ock Spidey train fight in Spider-Man 2, which is one of my favorite sequences of all time. But after seeing The Amazing Spider-Man a second time, there's one thing I have to do. This movie is amazing, and I don't intend to pun there, but I kind of do because it works so well. But I mean that. This is an incredible film, and I had to go into this movie a second time not comparing it to the Sam Raimi films, and that is the #1 rule. Anybody who is going to see this film, anybody, and that is the reason why this film currently has a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes rather than at least a 90%. Because too many people are going into this movie saying, it's too soon for a reboot, it's unnecessary, you know, you gotta get all of that out of your head. Forget the previous films, they're done. They're done. And the third movie sucked. I mean, you can see why they rebooted it. This is an outstanding film. Yeah, you gotta let go of any bias you have, of any nostalgia you have for the previous film. That's what ruined my experience, you know? I still remember seeing Spider-Man 1 and 2 in theaters. I remember being blown away both times, and some part of me just didn't want to let go of that. I just had to realize that those films are always going to be there. And I'll always have affection for Spider-Man 1 and 2. But this is a new start, and it is really great. First of all, I have to start off with the cast. The cast was one of the things from the very beginning. When I saw this cast, I said, wow, that cast is pretty sweet. And I have to say that everybody in this cast brings their A game. Every single person, however big or small their role, is great. And the great thing about it as well with the writing is that the characters this time around are truer to their comic book counterparts. First of all, we have Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker. And you know, when I first saw this film, I thought he seemed kind of like a punk. You know, he was skateboarding around school. He didn't always have the best manners to his uncle and aunt. But then I did a double take, and you know, some people convinced me as well. I've read the comics. I've read a lot of the old comics. Peter Parker, when he first came around, did have a big chip on his shoulder. Even if he didn't always show it, he definitely had a chip on his shoulder. He kind of was angry at the world. You know, he was a nerd. He didn't really have any friends. He was excluded from a lot of stuff. He definitely had a chip on his shoulder. I think Andrew Garfield sold that part of the character. And I'm going to say this. Look, I'll always respect and love Tobey Maguire for the first two, but Andrew Garfield is as perfect for the part of Peter Parker and Spider-Man as Robert Downey Jr. is for Iron Man. It's like you look at him and he is meant to play this part. I don't care if he's 29 years old, he is meant to play Peter Parker. Everything that makes you fall in love with that character, he brings it. You know, he's charming at times. You know, in a nerdy, kind of shy kind of way, he's charming. And then he can be very funny. You know, he cracks jokes as Spider-Man. Finally, we see a Spider-Man that cracks some really funny one-liners. You know, he has the emotion, he brings the heart to the film. He even looks like Peter Parker from the comic. Even if you look back to the old Steve Ditko, John Romita drawings, I think he really resembles Peter Parker. And I will say the same for Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. She is phenomenal in this movie, and she looks a lot like Gwen Stacy from the comic books. I mean, her eyes, the way she dresses. And I'm one of those people who definitely prefers Gwen Stacy to Mary Jane in the comics as well as now in the films. I mean, Kirsten Dunst, I was fine with her in the Spider-Man films, but she never even really captured the essence of Mary Jane from the comics, in my opinion. And her character was just never all that likable. Even though I love Spider-Man 2, this film is really a great love story. And again, that's something I didn't feel the first time, but watching it again, the way these two connect, I think is very well done, feels realistic. And the way they talk to each other, there's none of that cornball dialogue that the other Spider-Man films have between Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. I mean, not saying there aren't little corny moments, but they fit. That's what I'm saying. Then we get on to my other favorite parts of the cast, Martin Sheen and Sally Field as Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Now, I will always love Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris as Uncle Ben and Aunt May from the previous films. I think that they both were brilliant. You just saw Uncle Ben and Aunt May in those two. You saw the warmness, the kindness, you know, the loving in their eyes. However, I have to say that I love Martin Sheen and Sally Field at least equally as much. One thing I will say about Uncle Ben and Aunt May from the previous films is that they did feel more comic booky, you know. They felt more like they were copied and pasted right off the pages of the comic book, which is definitely not a bad thing. But I would say that that Uncle Ben and Aunt May in this film, they feel more like they're a little more humanized in this film. And, you know, Peter and Uncle Ben and Peter and Aunt May and Aunt May and Uncle Ben, they all have conversations that feel very grounded in reality. Martin Sheen captured everything about Uncle Ben, his lovability to his sternness, to just everything about him. That I mean, it's not a spoiler. You know Uncle Ben's gonna die. It's heartbreaking. It really is. And you just feel for him so much. And Sally Field as Aunt May, she perfectly captures Aunt May's love for Peter and her love for Uncle Ben, as well as how she worries so much for Peter. You really get that. Also, Dennis Leary is great as Captain Stacy. And I would say that, without spoiling anything, he might seem different from his comic book counterpart at first, but by the end of this film, he's definitely a lot like his comic book counterpart. Also, Reza Fons as a Lizard. Initially, I was disappointed in the Lizard when I saw this film, but upon rewatching the film, I really loved the Lizard as a villain. I mean, the Lizard is has always been one of the villains that intrigued me a lot from the comic books. Not because he was the coolest or the most interesting. Well, he was interesting. You know, he always had an interesting dynamic. And I just always wanted to see Spider-Man fight somebody like that. Somebody who could match his agility and who exceeded him in strength. And I think that this film did that incredibly well. I loved the fights with the Lizard in this film. I loved the scenes with them. And the Lizard CGI actually looks fantastic. You really feel Peter Parker's journey into becoming Spider-Man in this film. You feel how it's a gradual thing. Whereas in the old films, you know, he kind of instantly became Spider-Man. He instantly became all about great responsibility and all that. But in this film, it really shows him as a teenager. It shows him gradually take that mantle. You know, at first, he's just kind of toying around with his powers, and then as he goes along, he matures and really becomes a hero. Also, the action sequences. Now, as I said, I recently watched some of the action scenes from Spider-Man 2, and I love those action scenes. I always will love those action scenes. So when I first came into this film, I was kind of disappointed with those. But upon rewatching it, they did a phenomenal job once again. I mean, sure, it might not have all the crazy camera movements that the fights from Spider-Man 2 have, but it's incredible. This movie has some great fights between Spider-Man and the Lizard, Spider-Man and random thugs on the street. They're so exhilarating to watch, so well filmed. There's no shaky cam. You can completely follow the action. There's a lot of practical effects work. You know, there's some scenes where with the swinging, it was actually a real stuntman swinging, and it was just done so well. It looks so believable. Now, I'm a big fan of the score of the Danny Elfman films. I'm a big fan of that Spider-Man theme. And when I came into this film, when I first saw it, I was very turned off by that score. I was like, whoa, that's not the Spider-Man score I'm used to. What is this? Like, it doesn't even fit. Watching this film again, you have to forget that. You have to move past that. The score of this film fits Spider-Man. The score of this film is excellent by James Horner. It is fantastic, and I apologize to James Horner that I ever badmouthed your score. because you really did a great job. You really did capture Spider-Man growing into being a hero. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe The Amazing Spider-Man isn't an absolutely perfect film, but upon rewatching it, there's nothing I disliked about it. There's nothing that I would have done differently, and that's so opposite from how I felt the first time, but you just have to go in and take it what it is. You can't compare it. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I have to emphasize that you cannot go into it comparing it to the previous films, or you're going to be disappointed. Unless you didn't like those films at all. But if you go into this film accepting it like kind of like a Batman Begins, because this really does feel like a Batman Begins except with Spider-Man. It really does feel exactly the same, except it does keep the light, fun mood of Spidey as well. It is a fantastic film, a phenomenal film, and I cannot believe I'm doing this, but I'm going to give The Amazing Spider-Man an A+. Believe it or not, I was actually going to give this film a B- when I first reviewed it. I actually did film a review when I first saw it, and I was very disappointed, but I decided, no, I need to hold off. I just need to let it settle in my mind and see this film again. So glad I did. This is an excellent film, and you know something? It's my favorite Spider-Man film, even over Spider-Man 2, which is one of my favorite movies, but this is also one of my favorite movies of all time. And in fact, I might even go as far to say that this is my favorite film of the year. And that means, if you watch any of my previous reviews, I said that The Avengers was my favorite movie of the year previously, and I also said that it was my favorite superhero movie of all time. So if The Amazing Spider-Man is not my favorite movie of the year, then that means that it is my favorite superhero movie of all time. And I don't think that's a stretch. In fact, I would say that the one thing that would place The Amazing Spider-Man over The Avengers for me is the character of Spider-Man. I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man. He's my favorite superhero, and this film did a perfect job of doing him justice. It really did him justice, and it is the Spider-Man film that comic book fans have been waiting for. If you are skeptical, if you are on the fence about this film, put all those to the side. Go see it. Please go see it. And give it another chance if you were disappointed the first time. Think about why you were disappointed. But anyway, guys, just let me know, how do you feel about The Amazing Spider-Man? Did you love it? Are you kind of about it? Also, guys, just let me know. I'm curious to know, has there ever been a time where you went to see a movie one time and you were very not sure how you felt, or you were kind of underwhelmed, and then you saw it again and you were blown away? Anyway, guys, take care of yourselves, and this is Lance from the Mad Galaxy, signing off.